Okay, you're all right. One. Oh, we're live. What's up, wrestling fans? I am experiencing technical difficulties already. What's happening, Kevin?
Doug's just being kind. It's not technical difficulties he's experiencing. His turns out his computer, as well as all of the other properties of the Two Bros Wrestling Show, have been bought by Saudi Arabia. So, um,
If only that were the truth, I would have a nice, massive studio set up now. But that's false reporting, Kevin. That's false news. False
false
news.
news. Oh, okay. Well, I was
Fake
going to
news,
say that
whatever it's called.
everything's okay in the world of the kingdom. I mean, of professional wrestling this week.
The kingdom of professional wrestling. I'm even having trouble finding the right angle for this. And this is that. Oh, look, hey, there's an air conditioner back there. You can see now. If I move it back this way,
Doug
this
is
is going to be.
off of his normal equipment this evening, so
Yes, this
he
may be the two bros look we have through Q1 of this year, depending how quickly Apple pushes out a M2 Pro chip.
we have for our main event topic tonight, talking about Q1. We're right out of the gates from last week, which was a special edition in our return for the 2023 year. And boy, do we have a gangbuster topic tonight, and it is all the world of professional wrestling is talking about. Doug, gosh, I don't know what to say about this one other than everybody hang tight.
Just hold on, because this is ridiculousness. We are what, like 14, 15 days? I don't even know what the day is, but we are not that far into 2023 yet. And I do not know that this wrestling year could get any crazier.
Before I even get into the opening bell or the main event, I do have a correction from last week. If you didn't join us last week, or if you were just joining us because you watched our award show last week, definitely check it out if you missed it. It's still streaming on our Facebook and YouTube channels. But I think I mentioned that we would be putting up on Facebook polls about our match of the year or best wrestler, all these other things we gave awards for last week. And Facebook doesn't do polls anymore. So I meant to say our YouTube community.
YouTube, there we go.
Yes, it's in our
check
YouTube
out our
community.
The community tab on YouTube. Okay.
Doug and I agreed on tag team, on comeback, and match of the year, but everything else we had disagreements on. So if you're not following us on YouTube and are only on Facebook, definitely follow us on both. We would appreciate that, but that is where those polls are. And fun fact, if you missed last week's show, 25 seconds away from being the longest Two Bros Wrestling show in history.
What is our longest show then if we were 25 seconds away?
It was from earlier in 2022 when we tried to review or preview several pay-per-views in one big
okay, that's fair.
WWE mashup, and it ended up being slightly longer than our award show. And who knows, we may challenge that tonight because there's so much to talk about in this topic.
There's so, just in the past week on this topic, there is so much. But
so maybe just to get to it, what do you say we
let's get to it, man. Let's do it.
I'm trying an opening bell. Where's the opening bell?
Man, I'm totally lost. My whole system is
Let's just say ding,
right
ding, ding, opening
ding,
bell.
Ding, ding. Sure, that works. Hey, I'm not the only one having. Although I've got to say, this looks a lot better than the camera I usually use. I'm not sure about that, but maybe this is a better setup unintentionally. Oh well.
If Doug says something better tonight, he wants everyone out there to know it is unintentional.
It is completely unintentional, because usually I'm using this mic or this camera and here it is, this beast of a microphone, but my system is all jacked up right now, so I'm just using an iPad tonight. But I'm liking what I'm seeing here so far. This guy over here in the Champa shirt's looking pretty good.
I will say our audio is definitely better. So we finally fixed a problem we had. So thank you for everyone for their patience and who had told us that they were hearing a little something wonky. We have that addressed. So we are ready to roll. 2023
Let's do this.
Opening bell. Obviously, the top story is the resignation of Stephanie, the return of Vince. But since that ties into our main event topic, we're going to put that aside for now
That's fair.
and start with some different news. Let's talk Sasha Banks. New Japan's bet on Sasha Banks, or the former Sasha Banks, is already paying off. The artist, now known as Mercedes Moné, will face off against Kairi at the Battle in the Valley, which takes place next month in California. More than a month to go, and the event sold out in less than 1 week after Mercedes returned and was announced for the event. So looks like they might be getting a little something out of that contract, and they made a good bet on Sasha Banks.
You never bet against the boss, man. How many times have I said that on this show? Don't bet against the boss.
You can bet the bank, is what she's saying.
Oh, well, there you go. I like that. Bet the bank.
Like
absolutely.
The NWA is ending their subscription model that they had with Fight all throughout 2022. Fight had a subscription. You could get all this first run content from the NWA as well as the pay-per-views, but Fight will still be the pay-per-view provider for the NWA. So anyone that still has funds left on your subscription, do not fear. You'll be able to continue to purchase the NWA's pay-per-views until that subscription price has basically spent its way down and expends itself. This means, though, if you stop watching NWA for whatever reason, NWA Power returns to YouTube on Tuesdays instead of appearing on delay days later. They start their new season with the very first ever live Power edition on January 31st.
Live Power. I like it.
Power. Until that time, though, the NWA is featuring a new series called NWA Presents that's actually pretty interesting if you like, the podcast style. And if you're watching this, we hope that means you do. But William Patrick Corgan is in discussion with various legends of the National Wrestling Alliance.
So Billy Corgan, it always makes me laugh when I hear William.
No, Doug. Not Billy Corgan. That's a different dude.
That's the Smashing Pumpkins guy, not the NWA guy, right?
Exactly. Although they are colliding because there is an event called The World is a Vampire, which is a lyric.
It is not called that. Is it really called that? No, it is not.
It is a wrestling festival with music and heavy metal and alternative rock. And of course, Smashing Pumpkins is playing, and it's the NWA that is. I mean, they got big plans for 2023, including what I was saying is like these NWA Presents is Billy or William sitting down with an NWA legend. So this past week was him talking about booking philosophies and old road stories with Austin Idol. And then this next week, it'll be Dr. Tom Pritchard. And then there is the World is a Vampire Festival that's coming up, as well as an event where the NWA is traveling to Mexico City, and they're having a co-promoted event with AAA. So Billy is making big moves.
That William is making big moves.
Good. He's making big moves.
Not as big as some other wrestling promoters, but
but Doug digresses.
But we'll get into that in a minute.
Actually, it is a good opening bell as far as getting in a lot of different promotions and territories. Let's talk New Japan again. Carl Fredericks has reportedly left New Japan Pro Wrestling and has signed with WWE and is soon to appear on NXT. Fredericks had been one of the standouts and one of the more impressive talents in the New Japan Pro Wrestling's LA dojo. And his contract expired in August. He hadn't been performing much on TV during the end of that contract. He emerged at the WWE Performance Center for a tryout late last year. Apparently, he made the cut and will be appearing on NXT shortly. Doug, what do you think is the number 3 wrestling promotion in the United States?
Off the top of my head, I would say Impact, maybe.
I think we all would probably say that, but even though it's not currently available on linear TV in our area, where Doug and I live here in the tri-state area of West Virginia and Kentucky, the Women of Wrestling, WOW, has quietly become the 3rd most viewed wrestling company in the United States.
That's good.
In fact,
that's good.
Their January 7th episode. That's right. Maria Kanellis is involved. Mrs. CM Punk that is booking for them. But their January 7th episode scored the highest Nielsen rating yet in the series, and it had already surpassed both Impact and New Japan Pro Wrestling as the third most watched wrestling show in the United States behind the big two.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
it is amazing, and it airs on Sinclair stations across the country in syndication. We get Sinclair in this market, so get on the ball, Sinclair. Put it on
Right.
TNA for those of us here.
There are two Sinclair owned stations in this market. At least I think they were when I worked for them. I'm not sure about now, but I'm pretty sure they still are Sinclair owned stations in this market. So yeah, why aren't we seeing more WoW in this area?
Let's see it. Quietly, the number 3 promotion. But you did mention Impact, which I would have been my guess. So
Right.
let's talk Impact for a second. Frankie Kazarian is back
Yes.
to the spot of his biggest success. Frankie had been appearing on Impact, but announced recently that he had signed what he dubbed a long-term deal with the company. So who knows? Long-term may mean to the end of his professional wrestling career. But Frankie is a talented wrestler, and his biggest years were in Impact. Obviously, he'd been on AEW the last few years, so it's going back to where he started in some ways.
So that's the thing, because I was reading a lot of AEW original, quits and moves to Impact, but wasn't Kaz a Impact original, or do I have that wrong? Because I remember, back to all the way back to the Fortune 4 days or whatever their hand signal was for their 4 horsemen type thing.
Aces and Eights? Are you thinking the
No,
Aces and Eights?
even further back before Aces and Eights, when there were the Fortune 4, you had Kaz and AJ. And the drunk cowboy. Oh gosh, I
James
forgot his
Storm.
James Storm, and there was a fourth one, and was it Bobby Roode? Was that the Fortune 4 that were working with like Ric Flair back in the day to do like their own 4 horsemen thing? And because
I
it
think
seems
you
like,
are right. No, but I don't know that Kaz was ever affiliated or fought that group, or I don't remember him in Impact.
But it seems like Kaz was part of Impact from like way far back. Like I was thinking he was like an Impact original, just like AJ Styles. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
No, he wasn't. I think he was in Aces and Eights, and he may have been in that faction as well. Now that you're thinking, yep, man, good memory there, Doug. Going old school Impact. Don West again would be proud of you.
I learned at the feet of the master in Impact or TNA back in the day.
Doug, we're circling the globe with our news. European wrestling star Jenny, known to most U.S. fans because of her work on NXT UK, announced her retirement in the last couple of days. She'd been recovering from injury and had really been thought as possibly a centerpiece for the women's division when NXT Europe starts. But now the rumor is that she's destined for a backstage role with WWE, which very well may be possible because I didn't know all these years I've been watching Jenny, but it's also, I guess, recently been divulged. She's the real life significant other of WWE superstar Gunther.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
cool.
Hey, speaking of retirement, Mickie James is not retiring. She isn't.
Okay.
Mickie captured her 5th Knockout World Championship in the main event of Friday's Hard to Kill pay-per-view. She has been on what has been dubbed the last rodeo, which is a very Ric Flair storyline where if you don't win, you keep wrestling until you lose, and as soon as you lose, your career's over with. So she's in this streak, beat everyone from Mia Yim to Chelsea Green. And a lot of folks thought that maybe she was like Rick, was headed for a retirement with this match, but instead she beat Jordan Grace in a title versus career match. And so congrats, Mickie. Keep going, hardcore country.
Hardcore country.
Doug, we're going to end on some relationship news, both good and bad.
Let's do it.
Tessa Blanchard and AAA star Daga have each been very public recently on their social accounts, being public with the fact that they are going to be divorcing. And in happier news, congratulations to Ricochet and WWE ring announcer Samantha Irvin on their recent engagement.
Oh, that's a nice little bit of tying it all together there because
Thank you.
once upon a time, Ricochet and Tessa, like a couple, like way back in the day.
I'm glad that you noticed how I did
I like
that.
that. Good, well done, good sir. Well done.
Hopefully, they end up better off than Tessa and Daga, because that is honestly what usually happens with wrestling couples. Um,
Unfortunately,
Unfortunately, not an
yeah.
easy life. Speaking of
Nope.
not an easy life, Doug,
Uh, I don't know. It may not be an easy life, but it certainly seems to be a charmed life. I've got to say. We're talking about it. We're truly a Teflon Don here,
I mean, seriously, just when you thought to count the man out,
which we should have
what can we
known
say?
better. Should have known better.
So there's so many ways to talk about the topic of Vince McMahon's return that we want to cover every angle. So if you're only watching the TV product and have zero idea what we're talking about, a brief level setting
Yeah.
of how we got to where we are. So around WrestleMania time, the WWE board of directors became aware that Vince McMahon had paid millions in hush money to a paralegal employed by WWE to cover up an affair. Their investigation into that matter kept them going back years and years and discovering similar such payments to, what was it, Doug? Four other women, I think, was the
For
final
the
total.
women to the tune of about what, $15 million once all was said and done.
$15 million, not just for covering up infidelity, but in some of those instances, claims of sexual harassment. It should be noted that that was also
Hmm.
at play, not just
Right.
dalliances that both people were willingly involved in. And then that doesn't also include an extra $5 million that they discovered that was unaccounted for, that had been given by the WWE chairman to President Donald Trump's charity. So in
Money
total,
well
almost
spent there.
$20 million that were not accounted for. Doug, we should point out this was Vince's money. It was not company funds he was playing with, but
Hmm.
supposedly this all $20 million was Vince's cash.
Right.
But I guess you still need to report such things, and he did
I
not.
yes, yes.
And because of that, the whole fiasco caused WWE to have to reconcile its accounting numbers for 3 different fiscal years. And in the process, it cost WWE $12 million in its own
Hmm.
investigation. The end result of all of this fiasco was Vince retiring back in July, and Stephanie and Nick Khan being named the co-CEOs, and Triple H assuming creative duties. Deal done. We all are happy. Vince goes off into the sunset. End of story, right, Doug?
Right. Creative gets much better. The old man rides off into the sunset. We're happy with his company and a legacy cemented, tarnished at the end, but nevertheless, you can't discount the contributions that Vince has made to professional wrestling as a whole. However,
It
things
wasn't
flip.
quite the end, was it? Not the
It's
end of the
never
story.
it's never the end because, like I've said before, man, there is no way this old man is giving up his company. We're going to have to pry it out of his cold dead hands or give him a bunch of salty blood money to get rid of it.
So
So,
we obviously know better now, but apparently, at least according to many reports, the scheming, the plotting, as it were, began the moment that Vince stepped away from the
uh,
company. Um, Explain, Doug, to the people who maybe don't know how in the world that a man who was kicked out of his own company managed to force his way back in.
So
Um,
here's the thing, Vince, amongst many things that Vince McMahon is, he is a brilliant businessman. He's always said it, business is business. And Vince understood something very early on that to control his company, he needed to control his company, which, in the corporate world, especially when you go with public shares, Vince has controlling interest. He has the controlling stocks, even though WWE is a publicly traded company. Vince has, I want to say like 80%. That may not be the exact number, but it's something obscene to where Vince has controlling shares of the company despite all the money that's out there, all the other investors and all the other wealthy investors that are out there. Vince controls his company. So even though he has left the company, voting rights, we're still in control of Vince McMahon. He still had majority decision making power within his company that he had basically retired in disgrace from. So it was, oh, hello. Horns going by there. It's Tony Khan driving by. He's obviously watching the show with Chad tonight. But Vince, controls his company, and therefore he can put up the, hey, I'm going to bring myself back because I have control of, and essentially holds his company hostage at that point, saying,
Yeah.
I will not approve anything as far as the sale goes if we're planning to sell unless I am in charge of it. And of course, he can do this because, again, it goes back to who is in control. And even though the man is gone, the man controls the majority of shares to make the decisions in the company.
And it was a
So,
family business. He bought it from his dad in 1982. And to Doug, your point, like when it came time to go public, when they decided to go public, Vince was smart enough to keep controlling interest of those shares. Who knows? Maybe for moments like this, if anyone ever did try to take over his company, that he still would be
right.
able. And maybe we were naive because back when they had to reconcile the books, the last hey, this is the last thing we need to do, the last filing we need to give the SEC, the WWE board in that filing acknowledged the fact that that the chairman or the majority shareholder, I think is how they worded, was still able to dictate the company's actions. Now,
Right.
at the time, we read all that as meaning, hey, yes, this is the end of our investigation, but because he holds all the shares, we really don't have the power to discipline
Mm-hmm.
him.
Right.
However, now that we know what we know, Doug, should we have taken that as a indication that the board themselves knew that this was a possibility?
The breadcrumbs were always there. I mean, I think it's easy in hindsight, but I think as wrestling fans and seeing how the product has improved with Vince gone, I think, in our heart of hearts, we all wanted to believe that he was going gracefully into the night and would take whatever money would come from an eventual sale or any profit from the company and just live off of that and live the lifestyle that he wants to live, away from public scrutiny, away from scrutiny from being a publicly traded company, and he would just go off into the night. Should have known better. Should have
I
known
mean,
better.
it's as if we'd never watched Vince McMahon in our lives. Right?
Right?
This is the most petty man who took out like the biggest of grievances on television, to make sure that those who needed punished in his mind were punished. Um,
Absolutely. And very publicly so.
and very publicly did he lie in wait, I guess, and surprise us all with basically a coup. So what he
It was
did
it was very
was
much blood in the boardroom there. I mean, very much so.
five. I'm not sure how big. I don't know. I meant to look this up before the show, and if anyone knows, drop it in the comments. But how large the WWE board is? Typically, you're talking, most boards 10 to 20 people, I guess, on a corporate level. But we're talking five folks that ended up being turned over as a result of what Vince did. He, as a majority shareholder, voted himself back onto the board, and then brought
Hmm.
with him former WWE co-presidents George Barrios and Michelle Wilson. So
Hmm.
basically, two henchmen that had his back, and had all those three, himself and these two individuals, replace Joellen Lyons Dillons, Jeffrey Speed, and Alan Wexler. And then, out of protest, we can presume out of protest, once that happened, two other board members, Manjit Singh and Ignace Lahoud, resigned immediately. And so that's five folks immediately turned over.
And wasn't it Manjit Singh that led the investigation of the
Yeah.
improprieties of Vince McMahon
Yep.
during the investigation? So he's quickly out the door. And then hot on the heels of that, we haven't even touched on other McMahon family members exiting the family business the day he
Yeah.
gets elected back in. Prior to the board uh, unanimously voting to reinstate Vince to the board, Stephanie, his own daughter, leaves, presumably in protest because she left prior to the vote, resigns not only from her position as co CEO of WWE, but from the WWE altogether, and gives a thank you, good night, it's been great, but I'm going to sit on the sidelines and just be a fan now, just like I started.
So let's analyze the timing of that, because when Vince
Right.
comes back, Stephanie releases a statement basically welcoming her dad back to the family business. And then after that statement, it was only a matter of days before, in the newly stacked deck that Vince had, he was unanimously, as Doug said, voted back
Hmm.
as chairman of the board. Obviously, those are 5 votes that we talked about, 2 resignations and 3 replacements. And then, as you noted, Stephanie didn't take part in the vote. She's a chair.
Right. She's out.
So,
Right.
so that's 6 possible folks on that board that were not there for the unanimous vote. So, despite her initial, "Hey, it's great, Dad's back, business as usual," um, there's something that obviously we should read into why Stephanie decided it was time to call it a day, right?
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we are on the train to speculation station at this point. But I mean, I think any right, any wrestling fan, any conspiracy theory fan, even an armchair conspiracy theorist at this point can read into this that Stephanie says, "Yeah, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not coming back this time. I'm completely out." Stephanie, who exited prior to all this coming to light about Vince and was really railroaded in a lot of professional publications because of her performance and other things as she exited to take care of family issues, which is completely understandable. Her husband, Triple H, Paul Levesque, had all these heart issues. They have what, 3 daughters? It's understandable she would want to step away and spend more time with the family. That's not exactly the way it was sold in the public, once she'd left. But nevertheless, she leaves. All this quickly comes to light about Vince right after that. Vince exits. Stephanie comes back in to co-CEO the family business with Nick Khan. Vince comes back. Stephanie exits again to, return to taking care of family business and sit on the sidelines. What does she say as a fan? That,
Yes.
as she started with. So,
I mean, yes, this is not the first retirement she's had within the last 12
right,
months. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be spelled out by either side to say
right.
that Vince is around, Stephanie leaves. And supposedly at the time we were hearing reports Vince wasn't so happy with his daughter.
Hmm.
And Vince goes, and she manages to be like the head of the entire company until Vince
Right.
comes back, and now she retires again. That should say it
Yes.
all about the current relationship between Stephanie McMahon and Vince.
So, and here's the kicker, because Paul Levesque, Triple H, also sits on that board, is like,
Yes.
and but the board unanimously voted him back in. But that's almost a hostage situation the way I'm seeing it, because nothing can get done unless Vince is on board with it. Because again, as we discussed earlier,
Yeah.
Vince
He's
controls the majority decision making power within the company. So even if he wasn't setting it at the head of the table, so to speak, Vince is
literally.
still sitting at the head of the table. And they all, so I don't know where that goes. I'm just waiting to see Triple H, show up in AEW in the next few weeks.
Before we get into AEW, because I do actually want to touch on what
Right.
this means for AEW, let's talk about the timing of why Vince did what he did when he did. Let's break down the corporate speak. He called it a crucial and strategic time in WWE history, and that's why he's coming back.
Sure.
Basically, what he means is we're getting ready to sign some new TV rights deals, and those are both coming due with USA and Fox.
Hmm.
And then,
Hmm.
of course, there's the rumor of a sale, which primarily is why most people think he's returned. It's certainly why Wall Street thinks he's returned. If you look at
Well,
the way the
yeah,
stock goes,
and I think that's something we need to talk about too, because Vince mentions, you know, things come up about Vince in the past. WWE stock takes a hit. Vince mentions coming back because he wants them to be involved in the decision making for a potential sale.
yeah,
Stocks shoot up. The timing there is very important too, and the wording of his return is very important, because I don't think for a minute that any stockholders who are aware of the situations that have taken place are looking at going, yes, Vince is back. We're going to make some money. They're looking at it going, Vince is back, but he's talking about making a sale. Yes, we're going to make some money. And that's why stocks shoot up. And, again, I'm doing some
Yeah.
armchair analyst here.
No.
I do not take financial advice from me. I'm not a lawyer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm some disgruntled old Mark rambling on the internet about wrestling. But this is what I think.
I mean, the sale is the big thing. Let's take these one at a time.
Sure.
First the TV rights, because I think that's the lesser, and that says
Right.
a lot about why the wording might be corporate speak, but it's not wrong as far as crucial time.
Sure.
Because TV rights are important. We've done entire shows recently, talked ad nauseum about what a big time in AEW history this is, because it's a hard time right now with the competition in the world of streaming, the death of linear TV, that the slow decline, rather, like there's so much right now that doesn't make it very easy to be going into negotiations for TV rights. So this is not a small thing, TV rights, but there are some reports and rumors, Doug, that Vince already has some assurances on his TV rights, which is why he's coming back talking TV rights. But really, it's about the bigger elephant in the room, and that is behind the TV rights is a sell. Because guess what? WCW showed us this. Without TV, your product's worth next to nothing. So if there really is a potential sell, surely Vince knows I got these TV rights on lock, right?
But there's a bit of a skeptic in me, and I'm sure we'll get into this later. But yeah, you're right. TV rights first. But does Vince really want to sell his company, or is he just using like the TV rights negotiations and the speculation of a sale? Because I think we've talked before, and a lot of other internet sources, wrestling sources, have pointed out that bringing in Nick Khan is almost like a prelude to sell the company. The company's tried to look more profitable year after year, even though the company is very profitable. When we do these budget cuts in the past and cut people loose, it still makes the company look even more profitable than it actually is. So it could be very appealing to folks wanting to buy and looking for selling it. But
Nick Khan, that's what he does. That's been his history in business, is coming in, monetizing, and getting something ready for sale.
But is the WWE prime for a sale? Possibly. Is that a great, cloak to come in and under cover of the night for, Vince to work his way back into his company? Absolutely. I think time is going to tell what's what there and what's reality and what is, we're like wild mark speculation. So
in my mind, the TV rights, I just can't, whether he stays beyond a sale, or if it is the Trojan horse to get back in the company, which is very possible with a Vince McMahon. I wouldn't put that past him at all. I do think he must have some indication of a positive television rights deal, or WWE would not be in such it would not be the right time for the man who could lie in wait and come back when it was an opportune time. He wouldn't be coming back right now unless, in my mind, he has some assurances from either USA or Fox or who knows who, that TV rights are secured and that he can maximize some profits here with a sale. Obviously, Wall Street is speculating that that's what's getting ready to occur. Doug, we had a lot of rumors this week as far as those sales go.
Man,
we were getting whiplash.
I tell you what, I'm texting you before I hit the gym, and by the time I get out of the gym, I'm like, not only has Stephanie quit, Saudi has bought WWE. What the hell?
And this is not like the dark corners of the internet wrestling community. We're talking like the biggest players were reporting on the supposed sale of WWE to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which should be noted is trying to diversify its portfolio and is doing so as one of its primary sectors. They want to get into the world of sports. They bought into golf, and it caused a lot of controversy recently when PGA talent was leaving that tour to basically be at these events that were essentially owned by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Sort of whitewashing, sports washing.
Sports washing, absolutely. And
Yeah,
we could do a whole show on sports washing, but
I
the
hope we
kingdom
don't
of,
have to, but I'm afraid we're going
I'm
to.
afraid we may end up there. I really am.
I do
But,
too.
we could do a whole show on that, but, WWE is already involved in Saudi sports washing of
Yeah,
this agenda that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has to make themselves more appealing, and do this public service, not public service. What's the word? They're trying to change their public opinion, get more tourists to Saudi, and really they're sports washing this kingdom that has a horrible human rights record to make it more appealing for people to come to them. They're using the WWE with all those Saudi events. They're using, like you said, the PGA. They purchased a British football team. We call it
yeah,
soccer
that's right.
here,
Yep.
and they also have, I believe, some sort of, like, it's not NASCAR, it's Formula, it's some sort of racing, but all these sports washing things they're doing is trying to make them more appealing. So when we heard this wild speculation, knowing what we think we know about Vince McMahon and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia already, the majority of internet wrestling fans said, "Yeah, that checks out. That's probably right."
I mean, I
Yeah,
remember in your text to me, you said it perfectly. What does that say about Vince and the current situation that we all believed it so readily because it definitely checked all the boxes? Like, yep, that sounds about right.
that sounds about right. I mean, it's almost, again, speculation station here. Get on the train and ride with us, folks. But from the minute Vince left, you could almost see all these back channels working. Okay, we can do this. We can do this. I own X amount of the company. When the time is right, we'll come back in. We'll hand it over. You know,
Now,
it
there
it
are a
it,
lot of
it, it
these
just works.
there's a lot of these journalists and reporters that are saying that that even though it is not a done deal, that this is still very much the likely scenario, and that it very well may have started before Vince left the company, and
Sure.
maybe was momentarily sidebarred by the fact that Vince wasn't there leading these negotiations, but that the basic tenets of a deal were already in place. And if you look at the existing relationship, to your point, Doug, like the ties between Vince McMahon and the Kingdom of Saudi
Hmm.
Arabia are already there, and the ties to Saudi Arabia and the and sports teams and leagues and other
Hmm.
diversifications around the
Right.
world from their public fund of the kingdom are also already there. So, is this a very likely landing spot for WWE, other than the
It's
PR issue that it would create? Um, yeah, I mean, it has to be considered the likely scenario at this point. But it wasn't the only rumor that we had to hear this week, right?
it really wasn't, because before we've heard, Amazon, Disney, Netflix, others. We even joked about it, I think, on your last show when we were doing some wild speculation that Tony Khan buys it. Guess whose name is in the running
Yeah.
with his papa now to
Yes.
potentially buy WWE and merge AEW and WWE?
Even these
Which I guess,
reports say it's a long shot, but the cons are interested. I mean, if the check clears at that point, does Vince even care if he burns the place down? And
I
Comcast is also another,
Comcast,
like,
yeah.
way up there, like supposedly at the top of the list as far as who might be interested. But the cons being interested is interesting for a lot of different reasons.
A lot of different reasons. Because, to be clear, the cons, my understanding anyway of the situation, the cons would be part of a larger group of investors going in. It wouldn't be Shad Khan and Tony going in and writing a check and saying, WWE is ours now. Although I think it would be hilarious if they pull like the WCW back in the day, because apparently Shane has been getting.
Oh yeah,
Yes, I,
getting
I
eight
totally agree
hundred.
with that, TY. Totally agree with you, brother. Totally agree. And that's why,
Yeah.
Vince could totally continue on with no problems. But, I think it would be great if the Cons got together with Shane and Stephanie and purchased the company back. Like when Shane shows up on like the last Nitro way back in the day and says, "A McMahon is buying the company, but it's not you, Dad." There's just some sort of like beautiful poetry there. It's it rhymes, but
With
whether
all
that
the
happens or not,
speculations that is out there, I mean, legitimately, who is the most likely buyer? Who's the most likely player in this? Is it Saudi Arabia because of the relationship, or is it an Amazon or a Comcast just because of the money that they can wield? I have to think of AEW as a long shot. You can't count them out.
absolutely, absolutely. Unless
You can't
the
count
cons
anyone with
get
billions.
unless the cons get together with the McMahons and Rock. I mean, Rock's already in a group that purchased the XFL from Vince, so who knows? But I think
We got to
with
vote for here for Comcast.
you're right. I don't know, man. That the Saudi investment fund is has about $600 billion in it, to play with. I'm not saying all that money would go to purchasing WWE, but I think they are the deepest pockets. I mean, if you look at things like Disney, who bought like the Star Wars franchise, because I'm that Star Wars geek too, along with wrestling, but they purchased Star Wars for $4 billion from George Lucas. If the Saudis want it, the Saudis could take it. Yeah,
So, I mean, definitely the Saudis have the money, but the PR side of it, like we're seeing with the golf league, is
right.
what would the public backlash be for something like that? So, to me, it tempers it a little bit. I can't rule them out. I think that would be the worst option, honestly, just
Absolutely.
because
That is the darkest timeline for sure.
I mean, I hope we don't end up doing a whole show on it. If it happens, we will have to do a whole show on it. But what happens to Sami Zayn? What happens to the women performers? The whole women's
Right.
there's a lot of questions with a Saudi sale that would have to be answered. I think that a
Absolutely.
Comcast or an Amazon probably make the most sense, and I think pretty close to that would be Doug, your conspiracy theory that this is all a ruse just to get Vince back in the driver's seat. I
I you
mean, you
know
can't
I
discount that.
You really can't, because I say, darkest timeline is truly the Saudis taking control of this company, because like once 2030 hits and their whole initiative, make Saudi great again, or whatever ridiculous it's actually called, whatever that is, by the time it hits 2030, the Crown Prince, is going to have, Saudi in a much better place than it is right now in the public eye. How much do they really care about WWE after that? How much would they really care about it then? Because WWE would become a PR machine for Saudi and the
Yeah.
beautiful city of Jeddah, or wherever they're having their events from, just like it is right now. Darkest timeline. Another dark timeline, possibly just as dark, is this is all a ruse, and we get our TV rights. The Fox and NBC Universal, or Peacock, whoever, all that's solidified. And Vince just, kicks his son in law to the curb. His daughter in law is already out. His son apparently has been getting like $800,000 a year to do
Even
absolutely nothing since
even though he
Royal
had
Rumble.
already been kicked out and still
Right,
makes almost $1
exactly,
million.
exactly. So, yeah,
This is Secession. This is HBO Secession playing out in real life.
I've never watched an episode of Succession because it doesn't have a wizard or a spaceship in it. But I think I'm watching it unfold right now in my mind, and what I'm just putting together that's happening within the WWE. But Vince taking control and using all this is just a ruse to push the company forward. And it delays what probably is going to eventually happen, because, like we said, not Tony Khan, other Khan.
Nick Khan.
Nick
Nick
Khan,
Khan.
thank you. Thank you. Totally blank there. Shad Khan, Tony Khan, Nick Khan, too many Khans. Khan Noonien Sung. Too many Khans right now. But Nick Khan is there, I think, to facilitate and make WWE profitable and viable for a sale. But it's too convenient for Nick, or for Vince, just to say, you know what, let's just hold off on this for a while.
I do think that a sale is definitely going to happen. If whether or not it's imminent as they're making it sound, again, could be the ruse to get Vince back. Just say, hey, this is happening so quick, I got to
Yes.
be here. But there is just presuming that a sale is going to happen, and most of us think it will. We can disagree on maybe who it's going to be. No one knows,
Mm-hmm.
or when it's going to be.
Right.
No one knows.
Right.
But good and bad. Like what is bad for a sale? And I think we got a point here is like the back to that whole PR thing, not just in the public, but you would have talent that walks out. You
Absolutely. I
would
mean, because
and
going back to Sammy, Sammy can't
yeah,
go to Saudi, doesn't want to go to Saudi.
no,
KO in solidarity with Sammy because Sammy's part Syrian, is standing with his real life BFF. And I'm sure there are a lot of women talent that and I've seen a lot of stuff about LGBTQ talent. I'm not sure who on the roster identifies as LGBTQIA and who doesn't, but
but
also not a good human rights record there for those folks in Saudi either.
and it should be pointed out, he may not be a regular, but the biggest guy you have outside of Rock that is in the broader WWE family, John Cena himself, will not go to Saudi Arabia.
And
So do
here's
you
the
want to
thing,
cut that tie with
right,
Peacemaker?
right, because here's the thing, like we were talking about when this story broke about Saudi, Rock, that guarantees you shutting Rock out, that
Yep.
guarantees you shutting John Cena out. These two are Hollywood guys now. There's no way they want to be associated in any way, shape, or form in a very liberal, media driven Hollywood. Of course, Hollywood is media driven, but
I know
no
what
way
you mean.
there's no way they're going to be wanting to be associated with Saudi Arabia because those two dudes would never work again, and they know that.
And I believe that Tyler's correct that you'd have talent that would walk out. You'd have an entire division that would be in limbo with the like. I think there's a lot of reasons to point to the fact that this will not happen.
And honestly, what does that do to TV deals too? I mean, is Fox,
Who wants to be associated with Kingdom of Saudi Arabia?
or the USA Network? How
Yeah, good point. Yep, right there
you
in the name,
know?
right? Now, here's why, and not with Saudi Arabia, why it would be good for them to go ahead and sell. Um, any buyer would have to stipulate as to who they would keep on as management,
Yes.
basically. If this is a I'm coming back and I'm truly cashing in, at the very
Hmm.
least, Vince's shares are taken out of the equation, and
Yes.
thereby his power to dictate everything that goes on.
Right.
Vince comes back for one big payday, and he's back on the sidelines. So, in
Sure.
that regard, I've read reports that said that both Triple H and Stephanie are hopeful that the sale does happen because that takes this whole game of chicken they're playing with Papa Vince there off the
Hmm.
table.
Right, right, absolutely. And again, I think that the game's hands have been tied. In his part in a unanimous vote to bring Vince back in. Because what do? Are you the lone gunman in that slaughter? Because okay, you didn't
Who's
vote
going
me
to win
back in.
there?
Exactly, you didn't vote
Yeah.
me back in. These other nine people did. So go on back down, head on down to Jacksonville and see what he's got for you because you're done here. My daughter's already left. You're out too.
You provided a great segue here. We could keep going, obviously, about potential sales and what it might
Sure.
mean and who will be good for or bad for. But let's talk personnel. When Vince returned, he stated that the management team that was in place was strong. He was not there to change it. And yet, as
Hmm.
soon as he gets himself elected as chairman,
You're gone. You're gone. You're gone.
his own
Right.
daughter steps down as co-CEO. So,
And,
what should we
and
make of this for Triple H? Obviously, the sale is a big money game. So, um, first of all, should we believe Vince when he says that he has no intention to have anything to do with creative? Do you
should we
believe
believe?
him when he says that?
Should we believe Vince? Absolutely not. We should not believe him. Absolutely not. How this is
100% correct answer. I mean, I gave you a softball there.
I mean, you really did. I mean, how this manifests in the coming months, leading just through the road to WrestleMania. How this manifests is yet to be seen. Maybe he sets back for now and lets things ride out because Triple H has made a lot of positive changes,
Yeah.
probably to his chagrin. It's probably made the old man even angrier that Triple H has reversed a lot of decisions, reversed a lot of firings, brought back people, and is doing successful business with these people. Is he
And
involved in creative? Not yet.
not
Not
yet.
yet, but
And Triple H tried at least before SmackDown on Friday. Triple H sat
mhm.
down with the locker room. to
Yeah.
talk about everything that had happened over the last week and to assure those in that locker room that Vince had no intention of getting back involved in creative and that Triple H was still
Hmm.
firmly in charge of creative and that no
Right.
one's push or no one's position should feel threatened by the actions of the prior week or the resignation suddenly of his own wife.
Who
I
apparently
don't
was
know.
very, very loved backstage, very, very
Yes.
well respected, very, very much liked and loved backstage. But
Are you hearing anything about how the locker room accepted that? Do you know if they have you read whether or not it was motivational? I read that some folks felt assured, but I can't imagine that too many people are sitting that much easier because all Triple H is basically relaying is what Vince had told him, and that would again mean you'd have to be believing the words coming out of Vince McMahon's mouth.
I think Triple H and Stephanie both, have a lot of credibility within the company. They have a lot. They have a big fan base within the
Yeah,
talent
for
within the
sure.
company. And like I think, like us, they want to believe what they want to believe and hope for the best. But unfortunately, I think it's a situation where everybody in that locker room is hoping for the best, but honestly expecting the worst right now.
So, do you believe that Triple H's position moving forward in the wake of his own wife's retirement and Vince's return is if I just play ball, hold on, a sale will happen, and whoever buys will see the positive ratings and morale differences, and will just keep me on. And if I can just make it through this little interim period, I can stay head of creative. Do you think that's what is likely going on? Because that's what I'm thinking in Triple H's
So
mind. Has to be what
I
he thinks.
I've made no secret of my love for the game, you know, and I want to believe in my heart of hearts that Triple H and Stephanie are a legitimate WWE power couple, and they are well liked backstage. Stephanie exiting is because she cannot abide, she can no longer function this close to a man who has essentially destroyed her own family with his alleged infidelities that she's paid, upwards of $20 million, 15, $20 million for. She cannot get along with the man, but recognizing that her husband, who is called the game, has such a love for this game and is trying to desperately hold on to a future for their three daughters and the family. And Triple H is like the only man on the inside. At least that is how I'm projecting it in this old Mark's brain, trying to just reconcile while Trips is sticking around, you know?
So, do you think that, like, with my theory of like Trips just trying to stick around long enough to
Yeah,
hopefully have it be sold, and like, do you
right.
think that history repeats itself if he does manage to hold on and Vince does exit and a sale does happen? Do you think a Stephanie McMahon might yet once again unretire and take a place at a seat at the table? Because I imagine Nick Khan, since he's basically the guy that comes in, gets some place pretty up for a sale, and then
Right.
leaves. They probably will be looking for a president slash CEO.
Right. Yeah. Nick Khan, I think, he's came in, he's remodeled the bathroom. He's given some curb appeal to the front yard. The place is good for a sale, but then the dude who, wanted to sell the place in the beginning comes back in and says, yeah, no, I'm staying. That's my darkest timeline. If Triple H can't survive, I think, Stephanie comes back. What's T.Y. saying?
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's same. Like, I mean, there's
Yeah.
the not just the specter of what Saudi Arabia means for all the partners that the WWE has, but Vince himself and all that we know now about him and his own scandal. I think that yes, stocks are up because people are excited about a sale, but I think long term, Vince McMahon attached to the product would have the same detriment to stockholder shares and creative and morale and everything else you want to name by a potential buyer wants to make sure that Vince is gone because Vince is toxic.
Unless that potential buyer is the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
So, does Vince care? As long as he gets the money, would Vince rather, again, all we know about Vince and what makes it really bad on all of us for not seeing this coming is that everything we know of the man's 30, 40 years in the public spotlight is he's historically petty in settling his grievances. Would he burn the place to the ground if it benefited him? And I'm 77. I don't care what happens. and what people think about the Crown Prince or me walking away with blood money or any of that stuff. Do you think
So,
Vince even gives a
so
care?
here's the thing, man. Going back to when this story about Saudi broke earlier in the week, every wrestling fan who knows anything about wrestling said, "Yeah, that tracks. This
Yeah,
sounds right." So, yeah, and then the speculation starts. Well, of course they don't care if they would leave Vince in charge. What do they care? Let the man run the company. As long as he comes in and his well respected superstars. Let's get our Goldbergs and our Brock Lesnar's in here, and let maybe get a Hulk Hogan in here every once in a while to sing the praises of Jeddah or wherever, so that we can look good. I don't think they'd care. I don't even know where I'm going now. Just suddenly started ranting about Saudi again. But Vince, yeah, Vince, burn it down and leave. There's a meme that's been
yeah.
going around. I'm sure you've seen it from back. What was it, like? When he was going to inject poison into the thing he created and bring back the NWO. And again, everybody's like, yeah, that tracks. Here we are. He's going to burn it down from the inside.
I mean, this is a man who made other grown men sit there and kiss his bare behind on live television as a way of publicly humiliating people
Yes.
who he had backstage grievances with. This is not a mature individual. He's also 70s, late 70s, I think 77. I
Yeah, I
think,
think it's right.
but I mean, he knows he's not going to be around for the long haul. If he came back and made a quick $1 billion and burned it to the ground out of pettiness, it would be in character for maybe not Vince McMahon, the dad, but Mr.
Mr.
McMahon
McMahon. There you go.
is, yeah, how do you separate those two? I think we're seeing Mr. McMahon right now. Doug,
Oh,
we could
man.
speculate all day on, like, obviously I wanted to talk about Triple H and what his future may be, but I'm afraid we'll probably have another show where we, after the sale, need to think what this might mean for others. But, just so we're not short on time, we'll just quickly just broach the topic of we have hired back a lot of people
Yes,
as since Vince left. Triple H has
absolutely.
undone a lot of Vince's mistakes. To your point, Vince cannot be happy about that because it makes him
Absolutely.
look bad publicly that these maybe were mistakes. We don't know who all may return to unemployment if Vince does take control of creative, because we know he cannot be trusted. I 100% agree with you when I asked earlier. Again, softball, of course he's
Right.
going to get back involved in creative. Even
Yes.
in the meeting that Triple H gave to SmackDown Talent, he hinted at the fact that I'm still in control. Vince has a
Hmm.
say. Like, wait a
Sure.
minute. What Vince has a
What?
say? Yeah,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
there's no doubt
exactly.
about it. He's already in Triple H's ear.
Yeah,
And he knows, Triple H is smart enough to know you can't push back too hard because then you're gone too.
right.
Um,
And
I
Triple H
guess
is
one
like that.
thing that we definitely know, not necessarily who's been hired back that might be gone, but you can pretty much bet this means that you won't get a Sasha Banks surprise appearance at Royal Rumble.
Although I think New Japan kind of is owed a favor, trips a favor now,
That's
which would have
true.
made perfect sense for to have Banks at the Royal Rumble, not win it,
Oh
but just have a
man,
surprise appearance. Because
that would have
we
been
had
fantastic.
Anderson drop a belt at Wrestle Kingdom. It would have so much worked, but and how much of that Forbidden Door playing nice and acknowledging other companies are we going to get going forward now?
Again, you've given me a great segue here talking Forbidden Door. Before we get to the big finish, since we're getting close to time, I
Yeah,
know that this is at the periphery of all of this discussion, a discussion we will continue to have with you all as well on this show. But at the end of the day, what does all of this mean now for AEW? I mean,
yeah. What does it mean for? I don't even know because the cons have thrown their hat in the ring. I think that is a
okay.
very very long shot that the
Yeah,
cons have anything to do with it. But it could be the best thing to happen to AEW, or maybe the worst thing. Let's say Vince does go quietly into the night when he gets a few billion, sells the company by summer, and Disney gets a hold of it, Fox gets a hold of it,
yeah.
Comcast
What
gets a
is
hold of it, and pushes it to the moon. Right? They give this thing a push we haven't seen since Roman Reigns, first entered the WWE, and they put money behind it, and it becomes
yeah?
this juggernaut where that, especially with Triple H continuing to run creative, and everybody wants to run back. That could be the darkest timeline for AEW.
I mean, I know I said they're on the periphery, but really, this does affect them greatly. They're not so much on the periphery. Obviously, if they end up being buyers, which I agree, that's a long shot. But if they do end
Absolutely.
up being the buyer, that means Tony Khan becomes the new Vince McMahon. He owns wrestling. I mean,
And
he's
that's
what
something
Vince was for 20 years.
and that's something
I
I
don't want to
don't
see
want
him.
to see. I don't
No,
want to see that.
no.
I want to see competition with the Khans and the McMahons or whoever
It didn't
AEW.
work out for Vince. It didn't work
It
out when
did
Vince bought
not.
WCW. I mean, he felt like the victor, but we didn't win. And ultimately, he didn't win owning that property. It took a while to get his
Absolutely.
footing back. So
Right.
I agree with you. I think it would be actually bad if it ends up being the Cons and they own Ring
Hmm.
of Honor, AEW. Like something's going to have to give. I
Right.
do think that this complicates things for them, though. They're looking for a TV deal themselves,
Mhm.
and some folks may be waiting it out to see who is it Disney, is it Comcast,
Sure.
like who is going to have the big piece of
Who?
the pie
Who?
before we commit to the
Yeah.
smaller piece of the pie in AEW. So
Uh-huh.
Tony Khan definitely is a little bit behind the eight ball with this. I do think his responses, though, publicly have been pretty telling as to how he personally is taking it. He was
Hmm.
joking on Twitter about, gee, I wonder why everyone's being so nice to me today. Um,
Yeah.
it's not. It should be pointed out. AEW just got finished with the roughest PR year they've
Hmm.
ever had, the
Hmm.
roughest locker room morale year that they ever had,
Right.
and on the heels of this, with all of the wrestling world now no longer looking at AEW and looking at Vince and this whole situation, AEW comes out smelling like a pretty much sweeter option. And
Absolutely.
all the heat that was on them for months after Brawl Out appears to just evaporated overnight.
Right.
So Tony does stand to win from all of this, especially if this deal gets done and everyone forgets that AEW had a pretty rough year themselves.
Right. Yeah.
Doug, is there
Kevin, let's
anything else to say?
man, let's take this home now. I could rant about this all night. I'm sure you could too. Let's take this show home.
Let's take it home. We definitely will keep following this story because we do believe this is part one of a series that will continue as we know more.
Absolutely.
And once we know a buyer, because a buyer is going to mean everything about what we feel about
Yeah.
the future of WWE and those in it.
Yeah.
That's its own story to be continued. Doug, big finish time.
Let's
Let's
do it.
start botch. Let's keep it in the negative, and then that way we can end on positive stuff. What do you say?
Well, let's keep it in the negative. Let me go with the botch here, and I'm going to go with everybody who's anybody who covered this WWE Saudi story. Because as I have, dug into this and did my armchair research on it, there's no way that you can announce a deal that quickly. And I'm going to just say wrestling journalists aren't real journalists, but and somebody may have got a super hot tip from a very reliable source from within the company. And, I believe even Meltzer said, where there's smoke, there's fire. And he believes there's some fire here. But, a story shouldn't have been broke like that it's a done
Yeah.
deal because those things take a long time to do. WWE had just enlisted the assistance of what, Morgan Stanley? Is that it? Anyway, so it's some company
They do have that's something we
is
did we didn't mention it, but they definitely have representation now to facilitate
Yeah,
a
and I don't know if
sale.
Morgan Stanley's the right one, but JP Morgan. So anyway, they've enlisted a company to assist with the finances of this, and interestingly enough, that's only one of two American companies that can do business in Saudi Arabia. But
No.
yes, but it still takes a long time. Shareholders have to be notified. A lot of stuff has to happen. So just a little bit of research or a little bit of reaching out to, some financial people to, clarify some things would have, could have led to, we are hearing that, this is going to take, not that a deal's done, so
And this ties
I
back
get,
actually to our main event too, because we didn't mention it. But Triple H, a lot of what he was discussing in his meeting at SmackDown was assuring the talent, regardless of what you have heard, whatever happens is going to take some time. So the
right.
talent were hearing the same reports you're
Well,
calling your
sure.
botch, and they're freaking out too. What does this mean for me? I'm a woman, or I'm Syrian, or I'm like, they were buying it the same as we all did. Like, holy crap. the King Prince just walked away with Vince's company, which
right.
wasn't premature, obviously.
Right. But again, to the point we made earlier, it totally
Checks a
tracks.
box. Checks a
It
box,
totally
man.
checks a box. But I think we all just needed to step back and take a breath. I think my most reasonable text to you, and I had some pretty histrionic text to you that night. But I think my most reasonable text is I need Meltzer to confirm this.
Yeah. And to his credit, I never saw anyway that he ever
No,
did. So everyone
no,
else kind of jumped the gun.
he said on it, we had Sean Ross Stapp never saying anything one way or
Yeah.
another, and Dave Meltzer never saying anything one way or another, but a lot of other speculation going on. So,
Doug, you tied it in perfectly to our main event, and because of that, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Either the jumping of the gun, or even Vince turning back, or actually the botch of the week. I didn't do that. I went more lighthearted after such a hard
good,
topic. I'm
good.
calling out AEW and their video game. Come on, folks. You missed your Christmas window. How long are we going to watch these commercials? You have reviews. You flash up on the screen that this is the game of the year, the sports game of the year, which means to me it's ready to go. And now
Right?
it's mid-January, and you're still saying pre-order now for when?
Hmm.
Come on,
Yeah, yeah.
bunch of the
Al-
week.
al-
No doubt about it.
Although,
Nothing in the week of wrestling that happened is worse than that.
although in their defense, I've been waiting for an M2 Pro chip announcement from Apple since November, so which now I desperately need. But
Supply chain issues, my friend. It's supply chain
sure,
issues.
sure. How about that? Do you want to do match or performer, Kevin? Because
I want to do
my
performer because I really, unless you want to do the opposite.
no, let's do performer because it kind of ties in with my rants tonight.
Go ahead, ran away, old man.
So I think in this week of wrestling news and insanity, as much as I hate to do this, just like I called out, CM Punk on our last show and, gave him, some high accolades, I've got to give it to Vince this week for the performer of the week. The man's not been on television yet, but the man has been all over wrestling news and is controlling basically the wrestling media right now. We had like another summer of Punk this past year where it was not exactly the most positive summer of Punk, which led into the fall. And now we have like this new year of McMahon, which again, not necessarily the best thing, but something we've got to acknowledge is the man is back and he's here to stay at least for the time being and make a major impact in whatever he does next. So
I got to give it to
WWE.
you, man. You're owning our big finish because you tied it into the main. Yeah, I mean, who was bigger in wrestling this week than Vince McMahon, proving that he is the dirtiest player in the game, right? I mean,
Right?
the
Ric
true
Flair,
dirtiest
who?
player of the game. So yeah, once again, maybe I was just so encapsulating everything into our main event that I was trying to cleanse myself at our big finish because I went like completely ridiculous again. Because I mean, I know I sort of soured on Dominic Mysterio in the past on this show after initially being high on him, but man, I mean, especially after all the guy has gone through during his time in prison, I have to give him my performer of the week.
I love that, dude. That is
I
so
mean,
great because Dominic gets such great heat, and it's not go away heat. It is the
no,
heat that you want to get as a heel, and man, he is totally nailing it. I got to agree with you, man.
I think you
Totally.
both liked that he turned heel and separated from his father because we kind of thought he'd hit a
Yes,
ceiling there and needed to fly
absolutely.
on his own. But the work he's done since he joined the Judgment Day, particularly the Rhea Ripley mommy thing, it's
Yes.
done a world for his character. And I think the best evolution of that yet was what we saw this past week. Dude tries to show up at grandpa's house for Christmas and the law has to get called. And next thing you know, he shows up looking like his, Godfather Conan, like looking like a street
Yes. Totally did.
despite his baby face and all that we think about, like how he's not really legitimate
Oh, he's got
and
the
acting as
teardrop
if,
tattoo.
yeah, he's acting if he's telling prison stories. And I mean, I hope that this isn't a one-off like funny skit and this is a permanent part of his try hard, overly gangster character. It's so
Yes,
over the top. It's hilarious.
it is.
And he owned it. So yes, definitely great
Yeah.
character development. Keep that going.
much better than my performer of the week.
Oh, there's no doubt about who owned the week. You're right on that. Doug, and
All
I'm going to
right.
fudge a little bit on this match of the week, depending
Okay.
on match.
Okay. You go right ahead. Then I'm going to cleanse the palate and bring us home. Then.
Because it's not the last 7 days. Since this is the first time we've done it this year, I'm going back like 11-ish days and
All
going
right.
back
Fair enough.
to Wrestle Kingdom and one of the greatest matches of this or any year. My
Absolutely.
goodness, if you did not see Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay at Wrestle Kingdom, you mentioned Dave Meltzer, and you can like or hate Dave Meltzer. There's a lot of various opinions on Meltzer, but Meltzer sort of popularized the whole star system when it comes to matches. This was the second highest rated match that Meltzer ever had, ever, all of wrestling history. And I don't know, how do you compare matches from different eras to that extent? I don't know that you can. I will say that however many 6.25 stars that he gave, like, it deserved every last one of them.
Yes,
this was
absolutely.
A masterpiece, an absolute masterpiece. I was yelling at my TV from my living room. So I had to fudge and go back 11 days to call out this match to say, anyone watching this that didn't watch that, stop watching us as soon as Doug wraps us up and go watch that
match. So let me keep on the elite theme here. Since you already invoked Kenny, and let me bring it back around because at the end of the day, we know what a mark for AEW I am. And this best of 7 series between Death Triangle and the Elite. I mean, these are 6 of the most talented wrestlers in the world. If you disagree with me, come fight me about that because you guys, everybody watching right now, knows it's true. It may not have been like a 6.5, 6.25 star match, but as far as a TV match this week, the final in the series of best of 7 had to be the best thing on TV that I saw this week, with the Elite finally getting their belts back that they lost due to, not actually losing their belts, but, I guess maybe they did lose it in a trios match to, CM Punk, whatever his Ace Fury or whatever his name is, and Larry, the dog. But during the brawl out, but Elite stripped their titles. Death Triangle, grabs them and runs with them and kept them warm. But I think it was done in a way that made you think the entire time that Death Triangle may have actually keep these belts, and maybe there's something else for the Elite down the road. But great match, the Lucha Brothers, the Bastard Pack, the Elite, Kenny Omega, hot off of this bazillion star match in the Tokyo Dome like a week earlier.
17-hour flight or whatever, and then comes back and does that. Like all hell, Kenny Omega. Man, if I hadn't cheated and gone back a week and a half, I would have been hard pressed not to name that. But I'll be honest with you, AEW. It should be noted, we are talking all the bad here with WWE, but like, you could have called that match. I would have been happy if you'd have called Daniel Bryan versus Takashita match. Moxley versus Hangman. AEW put on a pay-per-view quality show.
Moxley and Hangman said, "Hey, dude, I gave you a concussion accidentally. Let's see if we can reproduce that again. Maybe you try and give me one too. Let's just see who walks out with the biggest concussion in this match."
I mean, I'm looking at the calendar. I'm like, is it Wednesday or Saturday? I'm watching a pay-per-view, right?
Yeah, they put on a great show. Quality, absolutely.
Watch Doug's match, but it's at the end, so start with the Mox thing and watch the whole 2 hours because they
watch the whole thing. Yeah. Absolutely.
We all had no choice but to talk WWE because of the situation this week. But AEW, maybe even buoyed by all that was going on in WWE, reasserted themselves this week at like, don't forget about us. We're still here. We are the alternative, whatever happens. And this is why. If that's what they were trying to do, it certainly
mission accomplished. Absolutely.
Mission accomplished on Wednesday night. Doug.
Man, are we ready to talk Rumble? It is WrestleMania season, Kevin.
It is WrestleMania season. The road to WrestleMania will be very different this year because of the circumstances. So Royal Rumble or Royal Mess, we're going to talk about it next week. Previewing the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Obviously, under the specter of all else we know, tune in Facebook. We're live at 8 Eastern time. Also later on that night on YouTube and anytime on demand on either of our channels. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment. We love you guys. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for watching.